which is right for you to play? This is a very, very common question that I get on a regular basis where everyone wants to know. I'm new to poker. I have no results. I'm trying to figure out if I should devote my time to cash games or tournaments. Which one? Well, first things first. It's important and vital and mandatory to recognize that cash games and tournaments are different. A lot of players make the blunder of thinking no limit hold'em is no limit hold'em, or that poker is poker, and they think they can study poker a little bit and show up and play any poker game and that they will be fine and good. Hate to break it to you, you will not. You need to make a point to specialize. I remember one time, a long time ago at Bellagio, this guy came to my poker table to say hello. He liked me. He studied one of my books. He said, I'm going to go play some limit hold'em to warm up for this 10-20 cash game, 10-20 no limit cash game, so that I can then be ready to play the tournament tomorrow. I'm like, oh my God, no. No. Limit is a very different game than no limit. Cash games are a very different game than tournaments. So let's go through the basics of the big differences between these games so that you fully understand which is right for you, because there actually is no definitively right answer because it depends on what you're trying to get out of poker. I will preface this with the idea that this presumes you're playing poker to make a living or to try to make money. If you're playing to goof off, have fun, parlay your money, whatever, if you're playing poker for reasons other than actually fully trying to win, then maybe this talk's not for you. All right, first things first. Tournaments have substantially higher variance than cash games. Why is that? Well, that's because in tournaments, let's say there are 100 players. You only really win a lot of money when you take first, second, third, fourth, fifth place, give or take, right? Which means you're only going to get a decent score 1 out of every 20 tournaments you play, assuming they have 100 players in them. Now, if you're playing tournaments like the World Series of Poker, which is happening right now, they may have 1,000 players in the tournament or 5,000 players in the tournament. Imagine you're playing a 1,000-player tournament. You need to get in the top 10 to get any decently big score. Well, that's going to happen 1% of the time. And you're going to win it 0.1% of the time. Now, obviously, if you're better than your opponents, you will win more than they do, right? So maybe you actually get in the top 10 2 out of 100 times. But 2 out of 100 is not a whole lot. Realize that you could go out to the World Series of Poker, play all day, every day. You'll put in maybe 50 tournaments. And that means that you would have to do that. What? You'd have to do that 2 years in a row to get one decent score. And that's about right for 1,000-player tournaments, assuming you're very good. I think a lot of people think that you're just going to go out there and run hot and win all the money. And, you may, but tournaments have a ton of variance. Whereas in cash games, every cash game you play, assuming you're equally skilled as your opponent, are going to be roughly 50-50. You're going to win half the time, lose half the time. Your wins are going to be as big as your losses. It's basically a coin flip. Now, obviously, there's rake, so you have to account for the rake. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if you are decently skilled over your opponent, you're going to find that either you win way more than you lose, or you win more consistently than you lose. One of those two things will happen, which will result in lots of money going your direction in the long run in a very consistent basis. So you have to ask right off the bat, do I care about consistent wins? Some people do, some people don't. Most people do, though. And that's very important to realize. See a lot of people in the chat writing a bunch of semi-asinine stuff. We're going to discuss all this in a minute. Sorry, everybody. Reading the comments, it's like, come on. All right. Okay. That is a big difference, number one. Assuming you have a small bankroll, and you want to play for stakes where you can at least win or lose some amount of meaningful money without actually risking your bankroll, cash games are almost definitively going to be for you. I know a lot of players have said in the chat already, cash games are boring, tournaments are exciting, therefore I play them. You got to realize, if you're playing poker as a professional, the idea of I'm playing for excitement goes out the window. That does not need to be a motivator for you. So many players who are, struggling tell me that I only play well when I'm playing for a lot of money. But what that tells me is you're not the type of player who actually cares about winning. You care about other things. You care about excitement, adrenaline, the gamble, the experience. And I would strongly recommend you get rid of all of that. Because whenever I'm playing, even the highest stakes that I play, I'm pretty dead inside. I am not having giant emotional swings one way or the other. I don't really care if I win. I don't really care if I lose. I've already determined I'm properly bankrolled for this game. I think I'm going to have X edge, and that's that. So you need to get rid of all these ideas of cash games are boring, because you play enough poker, all poker is semi-boring, right? And you need to make a point to realize that your job is to show up and play your hand to the best of your ability. And that's it. That's it. Don't worry about the wins and losses, because the wins and losses will come or not come based on the amount of skill you have over your opponents. So assuming you have a small bankroll to begin with, cash games are almost always going to be the way to go. Now, I will talk about sit and goes. I made a lot of money playing sit and goes a long time ago. Sit and goes are 10-player or 9-player tournaments, sometimes 6-handed, sometimes 4-handed, whatever. And these are, or they used to be, a very, very good form of poker to play, because you could play a lot of them, meaning you could put in a lot of volume, with a small edge. And if you play any game with a small edge that you can play a lot of, you will win consistently in the long run. My very first poker coach, a guy named Bill Seymour, taught me a long time ago to, if you're going to be playing poker tournaments, you want to make a point to minimize variance. Because if you have a lot of variance, you're going to go on a downswing eventually, even if you are a good, strong, professional poker player, right? And I fully realize that sit-and-go traffic is kind of down. Satellite traffic, especially single-table satellite traffic, is basically non-existent. But that is a skill you must thoroughly understand. I think sit-and-goes have kind of died. Well, sit-and-goes died because the game is actually not all that difficult, and if you are not good, you're just going to lose pretty quickly. Single-table satellites have kind of died because now a lot of tournament series just have a whole lot of tournaments taking place, right? So you need to figure out a way to decrease variance, assuming your bankroll is not gigantic, and I fully realize almost no one has the proper bankroll for multi-table tournaments. I mean, realistically, if you're playing 500-player tournaments, you probably need 250 buy-ins, assuming you don't want to ever go broke, maybe 500 buy-ins, depending on how much skill you have over your opponents, right? Depending on the rake, depending on the payout structure, etc. And most people don't have 250 buy-ins in their account. They just don't. So you need to figure out a way to decrease variance. This usually can be done by playing lower variance forms of poker. My first poker coach, Bill Seymour, actually wrote a book recently of all of his life stories. I think he's 81 years old now, and he's learned a lot. He's done a lot. If you want to check out that book, just type Bill Seymour into Amazon. You see his name right down there below. Type in Bill Seymour into Amazon. It'll come right up. If you enjoy lots of fun poker stories, life stories, etc., check it out. He's good at telling stories that also have a relevant point that teach you something. I learned a lot about not being an idiot from Bill. And, well, if you think you have idiotic tendencies, like I certainly did as a young poker player, then that book is for you. Check it out. Okay, next. Tournaments force you to play a different strategy of poker than cash games. Why is this? Well, it's because the structure is different. What do I mean the structure is different? They both have a small blind and a big blind, and you play the hands, don't you? Yeah, but think about what else is different. A big thing that's different is that in tournaments, there is no rake taken out on every individual hand, which means that the pots are larger, just by a little bit, in tournaments than they are in cash games. Okay? Good. Also, tournaments are very often played with an ante, which makes the pot even bigger. So, if you look at our game theory optimal charts at pokercoaching.com, you'll see that the tournament charts are substantially looser than the cash game charts. And that's because there's more money in the pot that you have to compete for. And, I mean, imagine there was no money in the pot, or there's like one small blind in the pot, right? You just wouldn't enter the pot. There'd be no reason to. So, you have to realize as there's more and more money in the pot, you have to play looser ranges. And that results in different styles being used. You'll very often see that the best tournament players are pretty loose and aggressive, whereas the best cash game players, way more tight aggressive. And if they are on the looser side, it's certainly nowhere near as loose as tournament players. And that's important to realize that the structure is different. Something else that makes tournaments a little bit tough is that you very rarely will actually know your skill level in tournaments, because there's a lot of variance. So many poker players I've seen start off playing, let's say, $10 buy-in tournaments, and then they win two of them in a row. They win $1,000 and $1,000. Now they have $2,000, and they think, oh my God, I'm pretty good. And then they move up and they start playing $20 games. And maybe they spike one of those. And they continue moving up. There's a typo in Amazon. Can I not type the word Amazon? Oh my gosh. And amazing. Look at me. That's why I'm not the author. Bill's the author. Bill's the author, not me. No typos in his book. Actually, would you believe it that it's very close to impossible to make a book without any typos. AMAZ, amazing. Amazon is amazing. It's very close to impossible to make a book without typos. Very, very difficult. Sometimes you can do it. If you do it, you're probably lucky. Anyway, back on topic. What was the topic? Oh, yeah, it's difficult to know your actual skill level. And that results in some players moving up too quickly. A lot of players think that if they are properly bankrolled for a game, that they must be adequately skilled for that game. Especially if they won all of that bankroll playing poker. But that is just not true in high variance games. This happens a lot of the time in Pot Limit Omaha as well. Pot Limit Omaha cash games have substantially more variance than No Limit Hold'em cash games, which results in way bigger swings up and down. And some players go on a natural big upswing and think, oh my god, I'm really good, I better move up. But that's just ridiculous. That's asinine, right? So you got to realize that just because you have won money from a poker tournament does not mean that you are adequately skilled to beat those games. Sometimes you're going to run hot. Okay? Very, very important to realize. And that results in tournaments being difficult to know if you are actually good, because you can easily run hot and win a bunch of money. You can easily run poorly and lose a bunch of money. There are a few poker players I'm thinking of off the top of my head who are world class, literally like top 25 in the world. And they are stuck playing $1,000 and $3,000 buy-in tournaments. Either because they're a little bit nitty with their bankroll, but also because they just haven't run all that hot anytime they get very, very deep in a big tournament. And that happens. It's unfortunate, right? So that's very different than cash games, where you can put in a lot of volume and you will pretty clearly see your win rate. And to be fair, in tournaments, you can also see your win rate if you use Hold'em Manager or Poker Tracker online. But all that really matters is how do you fare late in tournaments whenever all the money is on the line. And there's usually going to be an all-in you have to win when there's 20 people left, 15 people left, 10 people left, somewhere in there. And if you lose 12 of them in a row, hate to break it to you, you're not going to be all that big of a winning player, even if you have a decent edge in those games. And you have to be cool with that if you're a tournament player. A lot of players are not cool with that. They think, oh, I want to play tournaments because they're exciting. But then they complain whenever they don't win because they lost a flip late in the tournament. It's like, yeah, that's what you signed up for. It is vitally important to know what you signed up for. Also, tournaments require way more time to actually sit down and play than cash games. Tournaments require you to play all day. Tournaments require you to play, cash games require you to play like an hour or two at a time at the minimum. Tournaments require you to play all day. And all day does not work for a lot of people. Simple as that. Tournaments require you to study a lot of scenarios. Tournaments almost require you to be a player who knows how to play a lot of scenarios decently well. Which, interestingly enough, is one of my skills. I realize I am not all that good at being a hardcore specialist at anything. Whereas cash games require you to be a hardcore specialist at whatever the table stakes start at for the most part. I mean, if you look at most online cash games that are 100 big blinds deep, which they pretty much all are, they're quite tough. Why is that? Well, there's a few reasons, but one of the reasons is that high-stakes cash game players don't really need to spend all that time studying shallow stack strategies or payout-adjusted strategies, because there aren't any, right? So cash games really reward specialists, whereas tournaments more so reward players who can figure out roughly the right play in most spots, which is very important to realize. You may not want to be the type of player who studies the same stack depths all the time. That may be boring to you. Again, I realize a lot of you keep bringing up this word boredom. And studying cash games is boring compared to studying tournaments because you're studying very, very similar spots. At least the initial parameters are very, very similar. That said, it's also often very good because you get answers that translate very well to other spots. I mean, take a look at our tournament charts for 80 big blind poker and our tournament charts for 15 big blind poker. They're really different. Despite the fact that your position will be the same and your opponent's position will be the same, the strategies will be drastically different. Some people like that because it's exciting, because it's something that's one more thing to pay attention to. But that kind of goes out the window in cash games. I realize sometimes in cash games you have various payout structures, or various stacks where like some players will have 20 big blinds or whatever. But even then, it's very rarely you're going to be playing with a lot of big stacks and a few shallow stacks, et cetera, et cetera. Usually a lot of people are going to be a little bit deeper. So that is also something worth noting. So which one is right for you? I will very clearly say that if you have no money, if you're just getting started with poker, you need to play a low variance form of poker, assuming you don't want to have to keep adding on over and over and over and over and over again. So, what is that? Well, that's probably going to be cash games. Now, I will say online cash games are quite tough for many reasons. I'm not going to get into it today, but online cash games are pretty tough. One of the big reasons is, like I said, it's easy to just specialize in that form of poker, and that has inevitably made the games tough across the board. Live cash games, though, are a circus. If you cannot beat small stakes live cash games, assuming the rake is not too big, you're probably not playing all that well. I can't make it any more crystal clear. So, assuming you can get a hold of something like $10,000 for a poker bankroll, assuming you don't want to reload, if you can reload, you need less money than that. But assuming you can get a hold of something like $10,000 and you have a decent amount of skill, you've studied a decent amount, then I think 1-3 cash games or 2-3 cash games or 1-2 cash games are definitely the way to go. And you can very easily make 10 or 20 bucks an hour, even if you're not all that great. Now, you have to ask, is 10 or 20 bucks an hour a good win rate? Well, assuming you're playing the game for fun and because you enjoy it, because you want to see if you could play professionally, then yeah, you should be thrilled to win any money at it. Think about any other thing that you could be doing. You have to pay to learn. You have to pay a lot to learn. Imagine you want to become a doctor or a chemist or a lawyer or in any job. Pretty much any job, you have to study a decent amount to be competent at, especially very high-skilled jobs. I hate to break it to you, poker is actually a game that requires a decent amount of study and effort. And if you're not going to put in the effort to do it, to actually get good, you're going to lose. And I do think that learning cash games is easier than learning tournaments because, like I said earlier, you really only need to realize one set of preflop starting ranges, right? And so that's just like one step that's way easier. Your car isn't even worth $10K. I don't even have a car. Take that for what it's worth. I learned a long time ago. Get rid of all the nonsense. Cars cause a lot of nonsense, at least in my opinion. Obviously, you have to have a car to get around, but if you live in a place where you don't need a car to get around, then there you go. Or if you can have somebody else drive you, there you go. If you don't go all that many places, it's way cheaper to not drive a car. All right, so assuming you're new to poker, cash games are just the way to go. I hate to break it to you, it is. Assuming you want to make consistent income and you actually want to be able to sit down and put in a lot of volume. I didn't mention this, but it's hard to put in a lot of volume playing tournaments because, especially if you're playing live tournaments, there may only be one tournament in your casino each day. And imagine you are a tournament player, then you get to play what? One tournament per day? You get to play 3 hours on average? That's nothing. But if you're a cash game player, you can sit there and grind out 14 hours a day very easily. And if you're making $20 an hour times 14 hours, it's $280 a day. It's pretty good money. Most people would be happy making $280 a day. And that's if you're just getting started and not all that good. But you're playing in games where your opponents are also not all that good, and you have made a point to study something like my cash game masterclass at pokercoaching.com, and you're going to be way better than your opponents who are, losing at the smallest stakes games available. Okay, once you've gotten a hold of some money, what game should you go to play? Well, now it starts to deviate a bit. Assuming you've already been playing cash games a lot, you're probably actually pretty good at cash games, and you probably are not all that good at tournaments. If that's the case, it may not even be worth it for you to branch out into tournaments because you already have a solid win rate at cash games. For example, I used to sit at Bellagio and play 5-10 no limit most days. Whereas I could be playing tournaments, I could have been playing higher stakes cash games, but I sat there and I played 5-10 no limit. Why? Because I could consistently grind out about $120 per hour, and I could easily put in 12 hours a day with pretty much no breaks. So let's presume I played 10 hours a day on average, making $120. That's $1,200 a day, $36,000 a month. I would go there and I would play literally all day, every day. $36,000 a month. Playing, as some of you say, boring cash games. It was always nice for me because I didn't really care if I was bored, if I was making tons of money. Turns out making tons of money is not boring to me. That's fun and exciting, especially if it's pretty much free. And back then, or at least with my skill set back then against those players, it was pretty much free. And I realize the games are tougher today. Maybe now you can only do that at 2-5 no limit. You can make $50 an hour, or $60 an hour, whatever. Only $18,000, grinding like you actually care, seems like a pretty good win rate. So you can easily make $200,000 a year playing 2-5 no limit. And people don't realize that if you just sit down and put in massive volume in a game that you have an edge at, you can't lose. Like, I think I had one break-even month when I played 510 over the course of like a year and a half. And that's important to note. A lot of people, well, I mean, there's a saying that something along the lines of the only thing, or the next best thing to winning at gambling is losing at gambling. Something like that. And what that basically means is that I want to have the gamble. That's what some people think. I need to have the gamble. And playing cash games with a big edge is actually not much of a gamble. You just collect your money and you win. And that's not exciting to some people, but I don't care about excitement. I care about, well, profiting at the end of the day. Is live PLO cash games as soft as no limit cash games? Definitely softer. The problem, though, is that PLO is a pretty bad game. Why is PLO a bad game in my opinion? It's super duper slow. PLO live is about as slow as it can be. I don't know how many hands you play per hour, but it's got to be like 12 or 18 or something like that. It's not a lot. There's a lot of shuffling, slow dealing, slow playing. Every hand goes to the turn of the river, etc., etc. If you only play 18 hands an hour, even if your win rate's big, you're not going to actually be able to make all that much money. Also, the variance is through the roof, assuming your opponents are anywhere near decent and they're not putting it in with bottom two pair every time, right? Assuming they're anywhere near decent, you're going to have gigantic swings. So, you want a lot of swings without actually being able to put in much volume? No! That's terrible. How much of my plus CV playing at Bellagio was from bum hunting, which basically means playing with bad players. I would literally start any game with anyone at noon every day. I'd show up, there'd be maybe one game running, maybe no games running. I would sit down, I would say to the floor person, I'm happy to start a game and play with anyone. So no bum hunting there, they can play with me if they like. And then I would sit at my game. I would always get on the table change list. If there was somebody who was bad at another table, I would of course move. But I would not get up and leave if the games were tough, because the games were never tough. PLO is a waste of time and money, says David. I don't know about a waste of time and money. It's just not going to be as profitable per hour as No Limit Hold'em is. Online may be a bit of a different story, by the way, because online the game plays much faster because the whole shuffling aspect is gone. Also, you play six-handed online, typically in PLO, which means you're not going to get to the river every single hand like you will in nine-handed games. So there you go. Okay. Once you have a ton of money, and once you want to play bigger and bigger, this is where I think tournaments become very valuable. Because it's hard to find people who want to buy in for, let's say, $10,000 at a cash game. There just aren't all that many people in the world who want to do that. Because it's usually somewhat clear who the winners and the losers are in the cash games. And the losers are not going to ever have any sort of decent upswing ever. They're just not. So, what should you do? Well, you can either make private games, which I don't want to go through the whole political circus of doing that, or you can play tournaments. So, you have to ask, if my win rate at live No Limit Hold'em cash games is capped at something like $200 per hour, give or take, can I win more than that playing tournaments? And I think at the highest stakes, you can. At the medium stakes, no. But at the highest stakes, if you're playing, let's say, a $10,000 buy-in tournament with a 10% return on investment, you know it takes you 3 hours on average because the games are kind of turbo-y, then it means you make $333 an hour, something like that, give or take. Now, if you're playing a $100,000 tournament, maybe you're making more like $1,000 an hour, give or take, even if you have a 5% ROI, right? So, there you go, right? That is a way to make more money per hour, but variance is going to be through the roof. Variance is going to be massively through the roof, and you have to ask if you're okay with that. I personally don't care all that much about variance. I'll take on whatever. But a lot of people don't like the swings. They think they like the swings. They think they want the excitement, but they don't really. A lot of players think they want the excitement of the wins without the devastating defeat of massive downswings, and you have to realize that those two things go together. So yeah. So essentially what I'm saying is I think that tournaments make a lot of sense once you start playing medium and high stakes. I don't think they make a whole lot of sense for small stakes, assuming your goal is to try to win as much money as possible from poker. Now again, I cannot make this any more clear. Most people, 99.9% of people, don't actually play poker to win money. Now, that may sound crazy, because I bet every single person here thinks, oh yeah, I want to win money. Well, apparently not, because you're not maximizing your time most of the time in the things that you do. Your actions speak way louder than your words. Your words are essentially irrelevant. Everyone's words are irrelevant. What matters is what do they actually do. I'm telling you all, this is literally exactly what I did. I had this blueprint where I played the sit and goes online until they died. I think sit and goes would be a very good choice, but they died. And then, whenever I did not have a ton of money yet, I grinded up a ton of money. I sat there at Bellagio making $30,000 a month for about 18 months to where I had 500K. Then I was plenty bankrolled to start going and playing the games, right? And that is very, very relevant because it's not like I'm just bluffing you here and telling you to go do these things, because obviously you can do whatever you want, but I'm giving you my recommendations assuming you want to make consistent money from poker. And like my first poker coach taught me a long time ago, you want to keep variance low because otherwise you will have big swings in tournaments. And if you go to play tournaments with 30 buy-ins, like a lot of people do, I hate to break it to you, you're not going to make it. And you need to figure out a way to make some money consistently. Something else worth noting is there are a lot of players who have made a ton of money not ever playing tournaments, but traveling the tournament circuit. What do? Well, they either play satellites, where satellites have a structure where first place gets 10 buy-ins, everybody else gets nothing. Or you do multi-table satellites, where 1 out of 10 players will get a seat to the main event, which they would then sell to somebody else, and then pocket that money. And I think that's not a bad strategy. You have to realize that if you're playing satellites, those are very different games than tournaments. Don't think that just because you're a good satellite player that you're a good tournament player, or that you're a good tournament player that you'll be a good satellite player. But some players are specialists and they'll do just that. Some players will travel around, not play any of the poker tournaments, but play cash games all day, every day with the people who bust out of the tournaments and lose. So pretty good game selection. Play with players who are losers at poker tournaments. Sharp as can be. And those players are making good money in games that are very soft. And, you know, that certainly could be a thing to do. That way you get to travel and hang out with all your poker friends and, you know, grind when the games are good, while also not having many swings. There's a lot of value in not having many swings. I can't make it any more clear. It's good to see your money, your profit, your bankroll just increase all the time. Not so good to see it going up and down and left and right. It's not good for anything. So anyway, that's that. If you want to learn more from my first poker coach, by the way, he just released a book of his life stories. He's 81 years old now. Check it out. You can just search Bill Seymour on Amazon. It'll come right up. It's a good book, a big book. It's called Life's Memories, Friendships, and a Touch of Poker. There it is. There's Bill. He's an old guy now. Was a young guy a long time ago. Check it out. It's a good book. I have not read all of it yet, but it's started off very, very nicely. I'm going to go back and read all your chat, or all of your comments here, and I'm going to address some of these misconceptions. You usually win money in cash games, and then for fun, you lose it in tournaments. Okay. This goes back to the idea of just because you're good at one form of poker does not mean you're good at the other form. If you go to the casino and think, I'm going to play some poker, and then you show up and you see what happens, and you don't really have a strategy or a plan for what you're going to do, you're probably not going to make it. Simple as that. Unless you're a very skilled poker player. I can stroll into most casinos and play Limit Hold'em, Pot Limit Omaha, any kind of tournament, and maybe Omaha 8 or better. And no Limit Hold'em cash games, of course. And I will be fine because I've studied the game for the last 20 years. Most people have not studied poker their entire last 20 years of their life. Okay? It's important to note. Do not have an ego to the point that you think that you can just play any game that's available. Unless, of course, you're playing for fun. If you're playing for fun, do whatever you want. Don't expect to win, though. You're winning tournament and sit-and-go player in low stakes, but a losing cash game player. You lost a ton of big pots. Well, first things first. You lost a ton of big pots. Look, what's a ton, right? This probably goes back to a lack of volume. You must put in a lot of volume. A long time ago, I was struggling to beat 10-20 no limit online. I was learning from Dave Benefield and Tom Dwan, and I was complaining to Tom Dwan one day about how I'm running bad, down like $20,000, 100 buy-ins. He asked, well, how many hands have you played? And my answer was like 100,000. And then he laughed at me and said, that's a joke. Go back and play 1,000,000 and come back to me and see what we're looking at. So I put in 1,000,000 hands, and then I was winning. Who'd have thought, right? So you got to realize that you will have swings, and especially when you first move up to a different stake and when you first start playing a game, because I was not even all that skilled at cash games, you shouldn't expect good runs, right? You should expect to lose. Anytime you do something new against players who have been doing it for a long time, you should not expect to crush them. So anyway, realize whenever you say stuff like this, anytime anybody complains about bad luck, it means you're not putting in volume or you care about things that are not relevant. Bad luck does not matter. Late stages in tournaments are so much fun. Why? Because you care about the money. got to stop caring about the money. The money will drive you nuts. The money will make you do ridiculous things. Show up, play good poker. Your passion is for online tournaments, but you make better money playing live cash. Yeah, live cash games are a gold mine up to the 2.5, 5.10 level. You're not going to get super rich off of it, unless, of course, you consider $18,000 a month super rich, which, to be fair, most people would. As a young poker player, I had no skills, no degree, none of that. I would have been thrilled to make $18,000 a month, which is why I sat there and grinded out my $30,000 at Bellagio all day, every day. And I realized the rare opportunity that I had to actually make use of that spot. But yeah, live cash games are by far the softest form of poker today. Very strong cash game players and very strong tournament players. Good players do well in both forms of poker. You got to realize, anybody you're quoting who has devoted their life to poker for 20 years probably is pretty good at poker and is probably, like everybody else does, branch out at one point or another. I mean, I used to play sit and goes all day, every day, except for on Sundays, where I would play multi-table tournaments. One day per week, I played multi-table tournaments. It took me a lot longer to get good in terms of time at multi-table tournaments than sit and goes because I was only doing it one day a week. But I eventually got pretty good at those too. Same things with PLO, with Omaha 8 or better, with Deuce of 7 Triple Draw. I've devoted about 6 months to each of these games. I'm certainly not world class, but I'm pretty competent. And that takes 6 months of life. A lot of people don't want to devote 6 months of their life to anything. Wise Man said, cash game players are just failed tournament players. No, strongly disagree. Most of the sharpest players, in my experience, are cash game players because they have studied. Well, it really is a different type of person who can sit there and study one particular thing over and over and over and over and over and over again and be like really, really precise with it. And a lot of these people are kind of like savantish almost because like they're willing to sit there and just do the work forever. Looking at very similar but slightly different spots, like when the board comes Queen Jack 7 versus Queen Jack 6. How do various hands play differently? I don't really know, but the super geniuses do, and that is very relevant. In tournaments, you can be the best player in the world and you still have to win flips. Yeah, what's wrong with that? It's important to understand what you signed up for. Your cash game bankroll and your tournament addiction. LOL, haha, yeah. I mean, you got to realize they're different games. It's like people who go to work and then spend all their money on drugs and burn their weekends high as a kite. Not ideal. Not ideal. Get off of them. They're different games. Does being passionate about a version of poker allow you more longevity and reduce burnout? Maybe, but I think you need a mindset shift. You have to realize that if you have the opportunity to actually make money from sitting around a table playing a game, it's a pretty good spot. So take advantage of it and be happy. So many people are unhappy with their situation in life without realizing they have a better life situation than almost everyone in the world. You gotta have a good attitude. If you have a bad attitude, you're not gonna make it at anything. And if you're essentially a baby enough to think, oh, I only want to play tournaments because I want more excitement, I mean, you're not playing for the right reasons, most likely. Assuming, again, your goal is to win money. Let's see. Your rake is capped at 8. You're 8 pounds per hand. Oh my god. Seems tough. Tournaments are a lot easier. Cash game players are usually better. Online, this is the case. Live, definitely not the case. Most tournament players, in my experience, are better live than cash game players are, especially at small and medium stakes. Are sit and goes tough now? Yes, sit and goes are tough now. Sit and goes are tough now. I would not recommend sit and goes to anyone unless you just want to practice ICM scenarios at small and medium stakes. What's the difference between Hold'em Manager and Poker Tracker? Essentially nothing. They're both the same. I use Hold'em Manager. Some people use Poker Tracker. It doesn't make a difference. Get one, use it, figure out how to use it. You're considering transitioning to cash games after a huge downswing. I mean, so look, if you're losing at tournaments, either that implies you're not good at tournaments, or it implies you don't like variance, or it implies, I don't even know necessarily what it implies here, but the idea of I'm bad at this, therefore I'm going to go do something that's tangential to it and hope to succeed is a little optimistic. You need to spend a lot of time studying. Anytime you are on a big downswing, I can't make this any more clear. If you're on a big downswing and you are getting crushed, you must spend a lot of time studying. Simple as that. Something else Bill Seymour taught me a long time ago. Study a ton, work hard, and don't expect to just show up in any game and think that you're going to have an edge. And even if you think you have an edge, your edge might not be as big as you think it is. Something I learned from Bill a long time ago is to always drastically underestimate how much you think you're winning. And then spend as if you're winning about half as much as the low number that you think you're winning. Which means keep your expenses low, which in turn will make sure you always have enough money to live comfortably. And also, don't move up as fast as you think you should. And this may cost you some potential upside. It probably did cost me some potential upside. But it makes it pretty much impossible for you to go broke. And I've never been anywhere near broke. And this is all thanks to Bill Seymour. Again, check out his book. His name's right there. Type it into Amazon. It just came out. It's the first thing that comes up if you type Bill Seymour into Amazon. It's a good book. I've not read all of it yet, but I read a decent chunk of it, and it's a lot of fun. Who is my favorite cash game player? I mean, it has to be Garrett Adelstein, right? He's everybody's favorite player. Multi-table tournaments are a lot softer in your opinion. I mean, look, everybody, I've already made it very clear which game is softer than the other, right? And I've already told you the reasons why. When starting out with cash games, how should you know when to quit the game? I mean, you should quit the game when the game is tough. You should quit the game when you're no longer playing your best, etc., etc. So many players don't fully understand the concept that cash games are one long session. The last hand of this session is the first hand of the next session. Get it out of your mind that, I always lose at the end of a session. Well, that's because you're always going to lose some eventually, right? And if you quit every time you lose a big hand, that's the end of your session. Duh. So, realize that variance exists. Realize you are going to lose big hands. I have talked to countless cash game players who hate the idea of getting stacked. They hate losing their money in front of them. Whenever I used to play at Bellagio at 5-10, I would get stacked 3 times in a row with no big wins. Probably once every 10 sessions. 3 in a row. Most people could get devastated when they get stacked 1 time. I'd get stacked 1 time every single session, like clockwork. That's normal. If you're not getting caught bluffing, if you're not making thin value bets, etc., that fail sometimes, you're not going to win. You're probably not going to win unless your opponents are really, really bad. But anyway, typically you want to quit when the game is tough. The game is tough when you are losing. So generally a prudent thing to do is to quit as soon as you are losing a decent chunk, assuming the game is not obviously soft. And if the game is obviously soft, play until the game is no longer obviously soft. Obviously you have to go to bed at some point. You're grinding Zoom, making 14 big blinds per 100. Yeah, it's fantastic. If you can beat Zoom games, that's great. Shout out to Galen from the Poker Coaching Study Sessions. First place in a $50 tournament for $12,000. Good job, good work. Good job, good work. Thank you all for all the questions, by the way. I appreciate it. Appreciate all of you being here. How are my boys? My boys are fine and good. Why do people play Spin Pot Limit Omaha? Just for the lulz? I'm sure you can have an edge. I mean, we have a Spin and Go course for No Limit Hold'em by Ryan O'Donnell, one of the biggest winners in Spin and Goes. He's currently out there grinding at the World Series, I think, funny enough. Say hi to him if you see him. And this guy is a master genius with like 12 big blind stacks. I did not realize how bad I was at 12 big blind poker with no payout implications until I went through his course. Because it discusses using all of the options. When you're playing a game where you're going to have a low edge, you must do everything you can to maximize that low edge. And if you've not checked out the Spin and Go course, but you do want to learn how to play shallow stack scenarios, that is definitely for you. It's a deep dive on how to use all of your options. It's not only all in or fold. If you think it's all in or fold, you're a fish. I was a fish for a long time, so I'm not being mean here. I'm just telling you the truth. I mean, he's using all the options. Limp, min raise bigger, shove all in, etc., etc. We have a coaching page at pokercoaching.com. Go to pokercoaching.com/private for information on all private coaching options that the coaches offer at pokercoaching.com. Watching Negreanu not cash in his first 10 tournaments is discouraging. Okay. December, we're going to have a reality check here. You will definitively go on a 10 buy and downswing when you play poker tournaments. I have not cashed 40. I have not cashed 40 tournaments in a row 2 times in my career. I'm pretty good at poker. Now, I was very lucky that on the end of both of those, I won $1 million. That's nice. kept firing it in there. But assuming you're playing good, fundamentally sound poker, you realize the goal is to not cash. If you think your goal is to cash, especially in today's games where a cash is 1.5 buy-ins, it's like chump change, you got to get that. Yeah, you're not going to win if you care about cashing. That's what it amounts to. Now, a long time ago, getting a cash meant like 2.5 buy-ins. Then cashing starts to matter. But in today's games where they pay 15 or 18% of the field, whatever it is, you should not really care about cashing. You should care about winning. And especially somebody like Negreanu, who probably has some bracelet bets or some fantasy bets or whatever he has going on, he's probably even more incentivized to not care about cashes at all, and he's incentivized to care about wins. So he should not care if he breaks 10 in a row or 30 in a row, as long as he gets a win here and there. So get the idea out of your head that the goal is to cash. Why did Sit and Goes die? Sit and Goes died because the game is not difficult. If you take a game that is simple, no one will want to play it for money eventually. Kind of like tic-tac-toe. Why don't we play tic-tac-toe for money? You can play a lot of tic-tac-toe games really quickly. What are my thoughts on live versus online grinding? I mean, I already discussed live cash games are very soft. Online cash games are not very soft. One nice thing about satellites, by the way, if you can find satellites, is that very often they have overlays. Overlays are very beneficial, where they'll guarantee 3 seats and they get enough money for 2.5 seats. That's half of a seat they're giving away. Either it takes care of the rake to where you're basically playing rake free, or if there's more than that, a little bit goes back to the player. So definitely look for spots with overlays and tournaments. It's just free money when you can find it, assuming you're good at those games. How are the 1,000 to 2,000 no-limit hold'em cash games in Vegas? During the World Series of Poker, they're fantastic. I heard the World Series cash games are super soft right now. So get in there. I don't know. Haven't been there yet. How many sit and goes, 27 players online, have to be done to handle variance? So, Enrico, what does that even mean, handle variance? You have to realize there's a lot of variance in poker. 27 players sit and goes. How much is your edge? I mean, whenever you're calculating your bankroll, you need to know the variance of the game, your edge, and how willing you are to go broke. That will give you a rough idea for how many buy-ins you need. If you have like 10% return on investment, I don't know, you probably need like 200 buy-ins or something. Something like that. I go into the World Series. I arrived June 30th. You're a former Magic the Gathering player, pro player. Good job, good work. I was never a pro player. My claim to fame was being number 11 in the world at Vintage when I was 12 years old. Hope you're enjoying the show. All right. Let's see. Do you think poker players will ever have ELO ratings? So look, a big problem, Queen's Jam It, is that assuming you are a losing poker player, but you like to gamble for high stakes, what does that imply about you in life? Take a second to think about this. If you like to gamble at high stakes poker, but you're a big loser, what's that imply? Well, it implies you're rich. If you're rich, what's that imply? Implies you probably are good at something else. Do you want the people who know you're good at something else to also know that you're an idiot at poker? Obviously not. Imagine you are a world-class artist and you make a lot of beautiful art, but you're an idiot at gambling. That's not going to look good on you, right? Imagine you're a person in finance. People trust you with their money, but you're an idiot at poker. Do you really want people to know that you're an idiot at poker? Obviously not. Imagine you're a lawyer, but you can't be trusted to make good decisions at the poker table. Does that look good on you? No. So, as a professional, I don't want to do anything to discourage the bad players from playing. And something that will discourage the bad players from playing is having it all over the internet that they're really, really bad at poker. Nobody needs that. We're not playing a competitive sport here at the end of the day, even though a lot of people want to try to make poker to be a sport. We are playing a game, and the way you win at games is by making the edges unclear. Why do you think chess is not played for a lot of money, Queens? Jam it. It's because it's really clear who's winning and who's losing. There are no chess tournaments where the buy-in is $100,000. As far as I know. Maybe there's one out there every once in a while. Just doesn't exist. Why does it not exist? Because edges are clear. You want to keep the edges very, very muddled. Oh yeah, if you're enjoying the show, click the like button. That'd be nice. I'd appreciate it. Is it totally unrealistic to expect to have a win rate way above 30 big blinds per hour? Yeah, that's very unrealistic. You're going to win at like 6 big blinds per 100 hands, or 10 big blinds per 100 hands if you're good. How much do you need to bring to the World Series? You're going to the World Series to play multiple $500 buy-ins. Yeah, 10K is probably, I mean, it depends on how long you're going, right? Just do the math. What are my thoughts playing PL08 tournaments? I've never played a PL08 tournament on purpose. I've not studied that game substantially. I do not play games I've not studied substantially. I hear they're super soft, though. Zoom is way tougher than online. I'd recommend definitely playing more tables of slow no-limit hold'em than Zoom tables. Unless, of course, you're playing just a really, really battle with the best players. You're a semi-pro online tournament player who puts in a lot of solve work into cash but still cannot win. Cash games are tough. You enjoy cash more, but you can win at tournaments. I mean, you work harder, work a little bit harder. Maybe place much lower. You may have this issue where you can beat medium stakes tournaments, but you can't beat medium stakes cash games. You may have to start at the bottom. Anytime I've started a new game, I've always started at the bottom. People think I'm nuts for that sometimes, but I want to really clearly prove to myself I have an edge before I just dump away all my money. I'm playing Day 1D of the World Series Poker Main Event. 10 tournaments, that's nothing, I agree. 10 tournaments is nothing. They're literally giving it away at 1-2 in Texas. They're giving it away at 1-2 at all casinos. Now, I realize they're really giving away in Texas right now. That's because you're playing in semi-unlicensed, unregulated games. Be careful playing any unlicensed, unregulated games. Somebody asked about some shady poker site earlier. Yeah, you play on unlicensed, unregulated games, things could go poorly. Did you all see the thing about the shuffle machine being rigged? That's a lot of fun. Please be careful playing in unlicensed, unregulated games. Understand the risk you're taking. Protect yourself before you wreck yourself. But hey, if you beat the games for a bunch and then get cheated for some, you still went out the door, right? One of my friends was playing in the game where the shuffle tracker was rigged. He's like, yeah, I beat the game for about 100K and then they cheated me for about 30K. So, up 70. Chalk it up to a cooler, right? Fun stuff. Please don't play in games where you're really liable to get cheated. Just so much bad can happen. What in the world is all this spam? Block list, block list. Does anyone actually click weirdo links that come in on YouTube? Like, who's actually clicking that stuff? You would like to know the capacity that each player is playing at. Why? Because you're not playing for substantial money. You're coming from the point of view of the goal of the game is to see who is the best. Why is that the goal of the game? Just because you may have a goal for a game does not mean that that is the goal of the game for most people. Most professional poker players, their goal is to win money. They are not playing to stroke their ego and see if they are better than their opponents. Now, I will say, I do think things like an internal ELO rating could be cool. In Magic the Gathering Online, you can look up your rating. I liked looking at my rating when I used to play Magic Online a lot. But it was not published for anybody else. A long time ago, when I was number 11 in the world at Vintage, I had a very high ELO rating, like 1900 or something. Because I was playing with a bunch of people who were not very good. Think about how silly that would be, right? If you play a game against all really bad players, and you have a giant ELO rating, but you're actually not even good because you're not competing with anybody who's competent, right? Anyway, the game is the goal of the game for most professionals is to win money. The goal of the game for most recreational players is to get their gamble on. Nobody actually wants to have it published who is the best. Definitively the best. What's the next tournament I'm playing? I'm playing a $10,000 no-limit hold'em bounty tournament at the World Series of Poker, I think on June 1st, June 2nd, something like that. No, that's not right. That already passed. July 1st, July 2nd. Etc., 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 etc. How tough is the $2,000 World Series of Poker tournament? Much tougher than the Colossus? Yes. A $400 tournament is going to be very soft. A $2,000 tournament is going to be very difficult. How much does the price of Bitcoin impact the poker world in the short term? I don't almost know Bitcoin, but all the Ethereum, so I don't really care about the price of Bitcoin. I don't think it matters that much at the smaller, medium stakes. I think it does matter a decent amount at the highest stakes. Just like the price of everything impacts it. I mean, I remember when the housing crisis happened a long time ago, the games dried up a lot back then because a lot of the whole finance system went in the pooper for a little while. And a lot of the older, richer players have a lot of their money in the finance system because you get rich by owning equities. And that's how they did it. Sometimes that goes poorly, but whatever, hold it and grind it out. Did I hear a kid on the last week $100, 50, 100 game saying no one at the table could beat 50-cent dollar on stars? What is my take on that? Probably true. Most players in live poker cannot beat decently tough online poker games. Period. And that's fine. It's fine. It's way more difficult to, I'm not going to get into it. We talked about all this earlier. I have to go, by the way. I have a poker coaching homework starting in 7 minutes. I need to figure out what I'm talking about. If you are a poker coaching member, get in the homework. We're talking about a very intricate spot on the river where, I'll go ahead and spoil it for you. You're probably supposed to bet with everything on the river, which is a lot of fun. Also, if you have not already, check out Bill Seymour's book. It's a lot of fun. Just go to Amazon, type in Bill Seymour. It'll come right up. It's the first thing. It's called Life's Memories and Friendships. Life's Memories, Friendships, and a Touch of Poker. Check it out. My very first poker coach. I learned a lot from him, but most importantly, he taught me about longevity in the poker world. He was a professional poker player for many, 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 many years, and that's something most people cannot say. One of my good friends, Hoyt Corkins, told me that most poker players don't last more than 10 years. Hoyt did. He taught me a lot about longevity. Bill did. He taught me about a lot about longevity, and I hope I can teach a lot of you about longevity in this space as well. And, Bill has a lot of advice. He's lived it. He's done it. So make sure you check out his book. Good luck in your games. Have fun. I will see all of you in the poker coaching homework. And then after that, I think Louis Philippe is running a poker coaching study session. So there you go. Lots going on today for poker coaching members. If you enjoyed this, click the like and subscribe buttons down below. Good luck. Have fun. Have a great week. I'll talk to all of you next time.